I rented the cabin for a 2-week writing retreat. It was a small place, deep in the mountains of North Carolina. No nearby towns, no cell service, just a landline and satellite internet that barely worked. The listing said it was quiet and isolated, with no neighbors for miles. That was exactly what I wanted. I'd been behind on my writing for months, and I thought maybe if I cut myself off from everything, I could finally get back into it. The drive up took about 4 hours. The last stretch was a narrow dirt road that twisted through thick forest. When I got there, the host was already waiting out front, standing beside his truck. He looked like he was in his 50s, wiry and pale, wearing a faded red flannel shirt and jeans. He handed me the keys and gave a short rundown of the place, with stove instructions where the extra firewood was how to reset the router if it cut out. He wasn't chatty, but he wasn't rude either. Polite, quick, efficient. Then he climbed into his truck and drove back down the hill. I watched him go, the truck disappearing into the trees, and I remember feeling that first stretch of silence settle around me. It was thick and heavy. The way real silence is when there's no traffic, no voices, no anything. Just birds and wind in the trees. The first day went fine. I unpacked, walked around a bit, took a few notes for a short story I'd been meaning to work on. The cabin was exactly like the photos. Wooden floors, old but clean furniture, a small wood stove, 2 bedrooms, and an attic that the listing said was used for storage. There was no lock on the attic door, just a latch, but I didn't think much of it. I slept okay the first night. Woke up once around 3 a.m. because I thought I heard footsteps above me. Slow ones, like someone pacing. But I figured it was just the wood creaking or maybe an animal on the roof. The second night was when I started to feel strange. I'd bought groceries before I got there, enough for the full 2 weeks. The cabin had a small fridge and a pantry. I noticed some of the food was missing. Nothing major, just a pack of sliced turkey and a couple of apples. I figured I'd forgotten I ate them, or maybe moved them and didn't remember, but it happened again the next day. A full bag of trail mix, half a loaf of bread, and 2 beers from the fridge. Gone. I live alone. I'm not forgetful like that. Still, I tried to explain it away. Maybe I left something outside and an animal got to it. Maybe I was just tired and losing track. But that night, I stayed up late writing. Around 1:30 a.m., all the lights in the hallway flicked on. I turned them off before going to bed. I was in the small office with the door shut. The only light on was the desk lamp. I thought maybe there was a short in the wiring, or maybe I'd hit a switch by accident. I got up, walked out, turned them off again. A few minutes later, I heard the faint sound of coughing. Came from above me, from the attic. That sound was different. It wasn't a creak or a gust of wind. It was low, like someone trying not to be heard. I stood in the hallway, holding my breath. I didn't move for a full minute. Then I went back to the office, locked the door, and sat there for hours, listening. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I went into the attic. It was just an empty space with a few boxes and old furniture covered in dust. I couldn't find anything weird. I even checked for signs of animals, nests, droppings, anything, but it was clean. Too clean now that I think about it. Not a single cobweb in sight. That day, I went over every door and window in the house, all locked. I set up a couple of makeshift traps. I placed a few objects in specific positions, coins balanced on door handles, a rolled-up towel in front of the back door, that kind of thing. I wanted to see if anything moved during the night. I even considered setting up my laptop camera, but the battery wouldn't last long enough to record all night. That night, nothing seemed to happen. But the next morning, the towel was pushed aside. The coins had fallen, and one of the chairs at the kitchen table had been pulled out just slightly. I know how I left it. I was starting to feel a constant sense of being watched. like something was behind me every time I turned around. My skin itched. My ears were always alert. I barely slept. On the sixth day, I found the trapdoor. It was in the guest bedroom, behind an old wardrobe pushed up against the far wall. I was moving furniture around looking for outlets when I saw a line on the floor that didn't match the rest of the wood. When I moved the wardrobe, I found a small square cut into the floorboards, about 2 feet by 2 feet. It had a metal ring fixed to it like a handle. There was no lock. I opened it. Below was a narrow crawl space, not part of the listed floor plan. No light, just blackness and the smell of mold and dust. I got a flashlight and climbed down. It was cramped, maybe 3 feet high, running the length of the house. There were scuff marks in the dirt, footprints, old food wrappers, a stained mattress pushed against the far wall, plastic water jug, a small stack of clothes, and a spiral notebook. I flipped it open. The first page had a list of dates. My check-in date was one of them. There were pages of notes, observations. One entry read, "He sleeps light. Didn't hear me last night." Another, "Ate in the kitchen while he showered. Close call." My name was on the last page, just my name written over and over again. Then I saw the photo. It was a Polaroid curled at the edges. My face, asleep, taken from inside the room. I could see the blanket pulled to my chest. My phone beside me, the lamp on. That photo hadn't existed the day before. The timestamp on the back was from the previous night. I stood there for a long time, just breathing. My first thought was that maybe the host had left someone here. A squatter. Maybe he was hiding them, maybe he didn't even know. Or maybe it was him and he never left. I packed my stuff in under 10 minutes. I didn't turn out the lights. I didn't lock the door. I just got in the car and drove. No music, no GPS. Just silence and the sound of tires on gravel. When I got back into range, I called the sheriff's office in the county where the cabin was. They sent someone to check. I didn't tell them everything. I just said I found signs that someone might have been living in the crawl space. They said they'd investigate. I never followed up. A week later, the listing was still up. Same photos, same host, same reviews, all positive. I flagged it on the site, wrote a vague warning. The next day, my review was gone. I haven't rented anything since. Haven't written much either. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night thinking about the photo, about how close they must have been to take it, how long they must have stood there in the dark, watching me, how many times they came out while I slept and left without a sound. I booked a small apartment in Tokyo for a 2-month stay. It was listed on AIRBNB, clean, modern, tucked away in a quiet neighborhood in Shibuya. The host had good reviews, check-in was smooth, and the place looked exactly like the photos. White walls, light wooden floors, a small kitchen, a desk facing a large window, and a low bed against the far wall. I was there to work remotely. I move around a lot, and this was my first time in Japan. Everything felt perfect the first few days. I settled into a routine quickly. Mornings were quiet. I'd make coffee, sit at the desk with my laptop, and take meetings. The internet was fast, and everything seemed normal. Sometimes I'd go for a walk in the evenings just to explore. There was a 7-Eleven nearby and a tiny ramen shop a few blocks down. It was peaceful, but around the 7th day, something strange happened. I use a VPN every time I connect to the internet, mostly out of habit. That morning, I got a pop-up notification from my VPN saying it had blocked unauthorized outgoing data. That didn't usually happen. I checked the logs, and it said the activity came from my network, from multiple devices. But I only had my laptop and my phone connected. At first, I thought maybe I had misconfigured something. I checked my devices for malware, ran antivirus scans, nothing came up. But the logs kept showing small data packets being sent out every few hours. It didn't make sense. I changed all my passwords, disconnected everything, and even reset the Wi-Fi router in the apartment, though it didn't seem like I had access to the full settings. I decided to look around the apartment more closely. I started with the smoke detector. I'd heard of hidden cameras before, so I checked places people usually don't notice. The first vent was above the bed. I took the front panel off, and there it was. A tiny lens, barely the size of a fingernail, hidden behind the grill, facing directly down at the bed. My stomach dropped. I checked the vent above the desk next. Another camera. I felt cold. I went into the bathroom. There was a small camera tucked near the ceiling, just above the mirror. I didn't know how many there were, but I stopped looking after that. I backed out of the bathroom, shut the door, and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. I couldn't remember how many times I changed in there, or walked around half-dressed, or just spaced out in front of the mirror. I contacted the authorities the next morning. I had taken pictures of the cameras with my phone. The officers arrived later that day. I gave them everything I found, explained what happened. They were polite, took the devices, and said they'd investigate. I wasn't the first, they said. These kinds of things happen sometimes. People hacked into rental units. Sometimes it was the hosts themselves, sometimes third parties. I asked if they'd tell me who did it. They said maybe, eventually, if they found enough evidence. I moved out that same evening, found a hotel near Akihabara. It was noisy and small, but I didn't care. I just wanted to feel safe. For a few days, I didn't think much about it. I told myself it was over, just one of those awful things that happen sometimes. But about a week later, I got a message from someone I didn't know. No name, just a link. I almost deleted it, but curiosity got the better of me. The link led to a video hosting site, a mirror of a dark part of the web. It wasn't even public. You had to know how to get there. The page had my name, well, my username, the one I use for some forums and social accounts, and a list of videos all dated. The first one was from 2 weeks ago. The second was from the day I arrived in Tokyo. Then one for every single day I had been there. I clicked the most recent one. It was a recording of me, sitting at the desk, typing. The camera angle was from above. Same vent I had found. I watched myself stretch, rub my eyes, walk to the kitchen. It was me, clearly, doing all the things I remembered doing. I closed the tab, tried to steady my breathing, but something didn't sit right. I went back, looked again. The upload dates. That was when I noticed it. The first video had a date that was 3 weeks before I had even booked the apartment. The timestamps on the videos were before I arrived in Tokyo, before I even chose the listing. And in the next video, I saw myself brushing my teeth in the bathroom, same shirt I had on a few days ago. But then I saw myself stop, look directly at the mirror, and start speaking. Not to myself, but to someone behind me, someone who wasn't there. I hadn't done that. I was sure I hadn't done that. Each video after that included details that hadn't happened. A book on the shelf I'd never seen. A shirt I didn't own. A phone call I didn't make. I stopped watching after the video dated 2 days in the future. In it, I sat at the desk, typing, then suddenly slammed the laptop shut and walked out of frame. The video ended. It didn't show where I went, but it made me feel like I was watching a version of myself I couldn't remember being. I tried to track down where the videos were hosted. I traced the site, used some tools, and finally got a hint. It was registered in Russia, bounced through multiple proxies. There was a payment link too for subscriptions. Someone was profiting off this, watching, maybe even directing it. I sent everything to the Tokyo police, but I never heard back after the initial reply. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept my phone off, covered the hotel mirror, unplugged the TV. The next day, I bought a basic phone, changed all my accounts, even my laptop. I left Japan 2 days early, got on a flight without telling anyone. I didn't want to be tracked, even by friends. Back home, I stayed low. For weeks, I didn't go out much, just tried to forget it. But I kept thinking about those videos, about how someone had footage of me before I ever stepped into that apartment. I kept thinking, what if it wasn't the apartment? What if it was me they were watching the whole time? What if they'd known where I would be, what I would do before I did? That thought still eats at me. I never found out who did it. The videos disappeared a month later. The site went dark. Some forums say it moved somewhere else. Others say law enforcement shut it down. I don't know. I still move around, still work remotely. But I don't use Airbnb anymore. I bring my own Wi-Fi. I cover every vent. Unplug every device I don't trust. I don't trust mirrors, even now. Every reflection feels like someone else might be watching. The scariest part wasn't the hidden cameras. It wasn't the footage. It was the realization that someone out there knew my routine, my habits, even my decisions before I made them. That someone could upload a video of my future days before I lived it. And they weren't wrong. Every moment in those clips eventually happened, down to the smallest detail. Even the way I scratched my arm. Even the way I looked at the window before standing up. Everything. I don't know how. I don't know why. But I do know this, it wasn't random. It wasn't just bad luck. Someone was watching, not just recording, but planning. Maybe testing. And for all I know, they still are. I booked the apartment again without thinking much of it. The first time I stayed there, I had just finished a 3-week project in Berlin and needed somewhere quiet to reset before flying home. Prague was the perfect middle ground, beautiful, slow-paced, and cheap if you knew where to look. The minimalist apartment in Žižkov had been a lucky find. It was small, but clean and bright, with large windows that let in soft morning light, white walls, simple wooden furniture, and not much else. That's what I loved about it.
No clatter, no noise.
Just space to breathe. I had even written a review about how peaceful it felt. That was in April. Now it was September. A few things in my life had changed. My mother had passed away in late July. I took some time off, and after the funeral, I flew back to Europe to get away from the noise and people. I didn't want to talk. I just wanted to be somewhere familiar, somewhere I could disappear for a few days. That apartment came to mind again. I searched for it on the app, and it was still listed, still available. I felt a small kind of comfort in seeing it again, like recognizing a face in a crowd. Before booking it, I glanced at the reviews. Most were positive, nothing new there. But something strange caught my eye. A review posted just 2 days earlier. The profile photo was mine. The name was mine. Even the writing sounded like me. I read it twice. The first part was normal enough. Compliments about cleanliness, location, and quiet. Then the last few lines turned cold. Strange music playing at 4:44 a.m. It read, "Don't come back. I made a mistake. She's still here." I stared at those words for a long time. It didn't make sense. I hadn't been in Prague in months. I hadn't written anything since April. There was no way I posted that review. And what did she mean? For a few minutes, I hovered between backing out of the trip and just brushing it off. I even refreshed the page, wondering if it was some glitch. Maybe someone had used my name or copied my old review and added something weird at the end. I don't know. In the end, I told myself it was nothing. Probably someone playing around, maybe even a mistake on the platform side. I booked it. When I arrived in Prague, the sky was gray and low with clouds. The streets felt wet even though it hadn't rained. I didn't pack much, just one carry-on bag. I took the tram from the main station and walked the last few blocks. Everything felt the same. The bakery at the corner was still open. The posters on the wall outside the metro station were different, but in the same place. Even the graffiti hadn't changed. The building had one of those coded front doors. I still remembered the code from last time. It worked. That was strange too. Usually they change them, don't they? I walked up to the third floor. The hallway smelled like old paint and something faintly sweet, like fabric softener. The door to the apartment was the same matte gray, with the same little dent near the bottom. When I stepped inside, I got a strange feeling, like something was just slightly off, but the layout hadn't changed. The table still stood under the window. The tiny sofa was still there, the bathroom still narrow and tiled in white. I tried to tell myself I was just tired. It had been a long day. That first night, I stayed up late scrolling through my phone, not really thinking, just tapping. I almost forgot about the review until around 2 a.m. I heard something, a soft hum, like music, but not music I could place. It wasn't coming from another apartment. It didn't have the usual muffled bass or voices. It was higher, a kind of slow, looping pattern. I muted my phone and listened. It stopped. Maybe it had come from outside. I went to bed around 3. I didn't sleep well. The next morning, everything looked normal again. I made coffee, opened the window, watched people walking their dogs. I tried to relax. I even went out for a bit. Visited a park, bought a book, sat by the river. I didn't think about the review again. That night, I fell asleep early. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up suddenly. No noise this time, just a sharp feeling in my chest, like something had pulled me out of sleep. The room was dark, but I could see the outline of the furniture. Everything looked the same, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had just been there. Not in a dramatic way, just a presence, like when someone passes you on the street a little too close. I stayed still for a long time. In the morning, I checked the front door. It was locked. No signs of anything. I told myself it was just a dream, but the day felt strange. I kept checking over my shoulder when I walked. I kept thinking someone was watching me, even in crowds. By the time I got back to the apartment, my stomach was in knots. The third night was when I heard it again. The music. This time at exactly 4:44 a.m. I know because I looked at my phone. It was louder, still faint, still thin, but closer. I couldn't place the instrument. It wasn't like any kind of song I'd heard before. Just notes, drifting in and out, like someone was playing from another room. I got up and walked around the apartment. Nothing. I opened the door and looked into the hallway. It was empty, no music out there. But the moment I closed the door, it started again. I didn't sleep after that. I sat on the sofa until morning, my hands cold, my body tense. That morning, I noticed something else. My phone had a draft email open, to my own address. I hadn't opened it. The subject was blank, and the message said only one thing: "Don't come back. I made a mistake. She's still here." I deleted it immediately. I didn't know what to think. Had I done that in my sleep? Was I losing time? I looked through my sent folder. Nothing new. My review history on the app still had that strange review dated 2 days before I arrived. Same words. I packed my bag that afternoon. I didn't even stay the full 5 days. I booked a hotel in another part of the city and left before sunset. I didn't leave a new review. I didn't message the host. I just left. 2 weeks later, I tried looking for the listing again. It was gone. Deleted. The host's profile was still active, but the apartment wasn't listed anymore. My old review, both versions, were gone too. There was no trace of my stay, no record on my account except for the receipt in my email. I still think about that message sometimes, about how my own words had appeared before I even arrived, about that music, about the feeling that someone else had been in the apartment while I slept. But the scariest part wasn't what I heard. It was how familiar it all felt. The music, the cold in the room, the feeling that something had already happened before I got there. Like I wasn't visiting the apartment again. Like I had never left. I was in Atlanta for a last-minute work trip, a 3-day conference followed by 2 days of meetings downtown. I didn't want to spend much, and most of the hotels were booked or overpriced. I opened AIRBNB, filters on, cheap entire place under $90 a night. Not much came up that looked decent until I found this one. It had only one review, but the photos were clean, really clean. The lighting in the living room was perfect, kitchen spotless, bed made tight. White walls, modern furnishings, even a small desk in the corner. Nothing flashy. It almost looked staged, like a model home. The price was surprisingly low, $58 a night plus fees. I thought maybe it was new. The only review was weird. 1 star. I should have died here. I stared at that line for a while. It was the only review. No photos from the guest, no details. Just that sentence. I figured it was a joke or some kind of angry troll. The host had a verified badge and had been on the platform for over a year. I booked it. The check-in was smooth. Keypad lock. Code sent the day before. I drove up late on a Sunday night in a rented Nissan. The neighborhood wasn't bad. Quiet street. Mostly single-story homes. Trimmed hedges. Nothing out of place. The house itself was exactly like the photos. Small, boxy, clean. Not cozy, not charming, but neat.
No weird smells. No stands.
The air was cold, though, like someone had turned the AC up too high and then left. I checked the thermostat, set to 68, but it felt colder than that. I turned it up to 72. The first night was uneventful. I showered, answered a few emails, and set an alarm for 6:30. But when I woke up, the clock on my phone said 11:11. I figured I'd set it wrong or the battery glitched overnight. The phone showed full charge, Wi-Fi connected, but no notifications. That part was odd. I always get a few junk emails or app alerts overnight, even if the phone is in Do Not Disturb. But there was nothing. Still, I got ready and left for the conference. The second night, I noticed the cold again. I checked the thermostat, still set at 72, but the air coming out of the vents felt colder, almost sharp. I opened a closet to look for extra blankets. Found a folded one on the top shelf, no tags, no label. Looked new. I took it to bed. That night, I woke up again to 11:11 on the clock. This time, I knew something was off. I had plugged my phone in with the charger next to the bed. It should have auto-synced the time. But not only was the time 11:11, the background wallpaper had reset to default. My lock screen had changed. No fingerprint ID required. Just the default hello screen with the gray gradient, like the phone had been factory reset. But when I unlocked it, all my apps were still there. Nothing was deleted. I checked the settings. No software updates. Time zone was correct. Everything looked fine, except the time. In the morning, I reset the phone completely. Not because I believed anything strange was happening, but because I thought maybe the phone had a bug or a virus. I wiped it, reinstalled my apps, and restored from a backup. Took about an hour, but everything looked fine afterward. I shrugged it off and left for my meetings. The third night, I came back late, around 10:15. I parked out front, same spot. The street was still dead quiet. No people, no cars passing, no dogs barking. The porch light was on. I unlocked the door, stepped in, and noticed right away that the air inside felt wrong. The best way I can describe it is flat.
No scent.
No temperature. Just empty. I checked my phone and saw a missed call. From my own number. I hadn't used my phone all day except for emails and maps. The call had come at exactly 11:11 p.m. the night before, which I didn't notice because I was asleep. I clicked it. It had left a voicemail. Played it. The voice was low, whispering, muffled like it had been recorded through fabric. But I could make out the words, "Check the review again." That's when I felt my chest tighten. I opened the app, opened the listing. The review was still there, but it had changed. It now read, "I did die here. You're next." I stared at the screen. I went to the host's profile. Still no other listings. Still verified. Still active. I reported the review to Airbnb, thinking maybe someone had hacked the account or the listing. I screenshotted everything, even emailed it to myself. Then I tried calling Airbnb, but after a few minutes on hold, I hung up. It was after midnight now. I sat in the kitchen, lights on, listening. The house made no noise. No creaks, no hum from the fridge. I went to the front door just to double-check it was locked. It wasn't. It was wide open. Not ajar. Fully open. Nothing outside. My car was still there. Street empty. I hadn't heard it open. I hadn't touched it since I came in. I stood there for a long time. Then I grabbed my bag, my laptop, my keys. I took everything and left. I booked a Marriott near the airport for the rest of the trip. Paid the cancellation fee without a second thought. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I drove back to the house to see it in daylight. I didn't go inside. I just parked across the street and watched it. A man came out around 9 a.m. Not the host, someone older, maybe mid-50s, in jeans and a gray hoodie. He stood on the porch for a while, smoking. Then he locked the door, got into a white van parked in the driveway, and left. I noted the plates. I took pictures. Then I drove to a Starbucks and started searching. Not just for the listing, but for anything, news articles, obituaries, police reports. I searched the address, the host's name, anything tied to the location. I went deep, Reddit threads, city data, even Facebook groups. Nothing. But then I found something small. A 2-year-old post on a local forum for renters. Someone had posted about that exact address. Said they toured the house for a rental and got a weird vibe. Landlord didn't show up in person. The place felt cold. Lights flickered. The post had no replies. That night, I got another call. Again from my own number. I didn't answer. No voicemail this time. I deleted the listing from my saved trips. Blocked the number. I changed my account password. Added 2-factor. I even factory reset my phone again. I finished my meetings. Flew home. Didn't tell anyone. Not my coworkers, not my girlfriend. I didn't want to sound crazy. About a month later, I checked again. The listing was gone. Not just unlisted, deleted.
No trace.
The host's account no longer existed. The screenshots I'd taken still sat in my email. Same review. Same timestamp on the voicemail. Same photo of the house. I don't think the house was haunted. Nothing moved on its own.
No footsteps. No lights flickering.
But something had been wrong. The phone resets. The voicemail. The door. The review changing. These were things someone could have done, technically. Maybe even easily if they had access. And that's the part that stayed with me. The idea that someone was doing it. Someone with access to the house. Maybe watching. Maybe waiting. I didn't die there. But someone did. I believe that now. And I was supposed to be next. I booked a small studio in Berlin for 3 nights. I had been traveling alone for a while, and after long hostels and shared spaces, I wanted something private where I could relax. The listing showed a clean, cozy room with a kitchenette, a bed, and plenty of natural light. The photos had caught my attention because the space looked unusual. There were large, framed mirrors on the walls, tall ones leaning against corners, and smaller ones arranged in patterns. The description mentioned them briefly, saying they were antiques from an old theater. I didn't think much of it. It almost added a charm to the place, something different from the usual sterile apartments. The host met me at the door, middle-aged, polite, and practical. He handed me the keys and mentioned the mirrors again, almost proudly, saying they were heirlooms. I nodded, rolled my bag inside, and didn't press him about it. The studio was tidy. The mirrors were indeed everywhere. Some were tall with gold frames, others oval with fading silver trim, and a few smaller ones grouped like tiles over the desk. Every wall had at least one, so it was impossible to be in the room without catching your reflection from some angle. I unpacked, cooked a quick meal, and settled in. That first evening, I sat at the small table scrolling through my phone. The mirrors made the room feel bigger but also strange. Every time I glanced up, there I was, multiplied, staring back. At one point, I caught my reflection in the corner of my eye, and it startled me. The angle of the mirror made it look like someone was standing closer than they should. I laughed at myself and went back to what I was doing. Later, I noticed the glass wasn't perfectly clean. Some had faint smudges, scratches, or spots where the backing had aged. It gave them a cloudy quality. A few tilted slightly, not hanging flush to the wall. That irregularity made some reflections a fraction of a second slower when I moved. My brain told me it was just an angle thing, but it was unsettling enough that I found myself avoiding eye contact with them when I got ready for bed. That night, I fell asleep quickly. Sometime deep into the night, I woke up. The room was silent except for faint street noise through the window. My eyes adjusted to the dark, and the mirrors picked up faint glows of light. That was when I heard it, the soft sound of tapping. At first, I thought it was the radiator or maybe something outside, but it wasn't steady like a machine. It was irregular, light taps, almost like fingernails against glass. I lay still, listening. It seemed to come from more than one direction. I lifted my head slightly and looked around. My heart started to beat faster when I realized the sound was coming from the mirrors themselves. I pushed the blanket back and sat up. The room felt colder than it had before. I glanced at the tall mirror opposite the bed, and for a moment I froze. My reflection wasn't exactly matching me. I rubbed my eyes, thinking I was still half asleep, but it didn't change. I moved my arm slowly, and the reflection followed, but there was a tiny lag, almost imperceptible but there. I turned my head, and it turned too, but a fraction too late. I looked at another mirror to the side. In that one, my reflection was lying down, as if I were still asleep, eyes closed, blanket pulled up. I wasn't imagining it. I turned to the smaller cluster above the desk. In one, I stood beside the bed, staring back at myself, only I hadn't moved from where I was sitting. I felt an icy chill crawl across my skin. The tapping grew a little louder. I scanned the room, my breath quickening. Every mirror seemed to be showing something slightly different. Some were in sync but delayed. Some weren't synced at all. One mirror near the window showed me standing just behind where I sat, so close I could almost feel breath on my neck. I told myself it had to be exhaustion, maybe a trick of the light or my eyes not focusing properly. But no matter how much I blinked or rubbed my face, the images didn't match. I wanted to get out of the bed, but I was terrified that if I moved, one of those versions of me wouldn't move the same way. I forced myself to stand. My legs shook. I walked slowly toward the bathroom, avoiding the mirrors, keeping my eyes down. I could still sense them around me, all of them showing something I didn't want to see. The tapping followed as I crossed the room, soft, patient, like someone reminding me they were there. Inside the bathroom, there was only one small mirror above the sink. I flicked on the light and stared at myself. That one looked normal, perfectly in sync. I held onto the sink and tried to breathe. I thought about packing my things and leaving right then, but I had nowhere to go in the middle of the night, and the streets outside were empty. I splashed water on my face, sat on the closed toilet lid for a long while, and tried to convince myself it was stress, fatigue, anything rational. When I finally returned to the main room, I kept my eyes low and climbed back into bed. I pulled the blanket over my head like a child, and somehow, despite the fear, I drifted into a shallow, uneasy sleep. In the morning, daylight filled the room, and everything looked normal again. The mirrors showed me as they should. No lags, no alternate positions. I inspected them one by one, forcing myself to check. My rational mind kicked in. Maybe my brain had played tricks on me. Maybe the streetlights and my half-sleeping state distorted my perception. I told myself that, but deep down I wasn't convinced. The second night, I didn't sleep. I left a lamp on and sat awake in bed, watching. For hours, nothing happened. But around 3 in the morning, I heard it again, the same faint tapping, like a finger drumming on glass. My stomach twisted. I stared hard at the mirrors, and once more, they began to misalign. In one, I saw myself smiling faintly when I wasn't. In another, I saw my head tilted when I was sitting straight. I stood, trembling, and grabbed a throw blanket from the chair. One by one, I covered as many mirrors as I could, draping fabric, flipping them to face the wall, anything to block the reflections. The sound lessened as I did, though I could still hear faint ticks beneath the fabric. By the time I was done, nearly every mirror was covered except a few too large to move. I returned to bed, exhausted but determined not to close my eyes. The third morning, I left the studio hours earlier than checkout. I packed everything in silence and slipped the key into the lockbox outside. The street was wet from rain, the air sharp and cold, but it felt freeing. Looking back now, I don't believe in supernatural things. What I saw had to have an explanation: light distortions, stress, maybe even mild hallucinations from exhaustion. But I know what I felt. The fear was real, the tapping was real, the way my own face didn't quite belong to me in those mirrors was real. I've stayed in many places since then, but I don't book apartments with mirrors anymore. I always check the photos twice, and if I see even one on the wall, I scroll past. I never want to be surrounded by my own reflection like that again. The memory is enough. Even now, when I think back to that Berlin studio, the thing that unsettles me most is not the sound or the movements. It's the image I can't forget, the version of me standing just behind myself, close enough to reach out, and the certainty that if I had turned around fast enough, I might have seen nothing, or worse, seen something I wasn't ready to face. We booked the farmhouse on a whim. It was August, late in the month, and we wanted to get out of the city for a bit. Somewhere quiet, away from traffic and screens and people. The listing had popped up after I searched for something rural in Oregon, and it was perfect. An old farmhouse surrounded by forest and fields. No neighbors for miles, just the sound of birds and wind and maybe a creek if we were lucky. The pictures looked clean and cozy. Exposed beams, a small porch, lots of space. The hosts didn't have many reviews, but the ones there were all positive. Most mentioned how peaceful it was. A few said it had a unique charm. We drove out in the afternoon. The roads got narrower the farther we went. No streetlights, no gas stations. By the time we arrived, the sun was low. The place looked like the pictures. White wood siding, green trim around the windows, a rusted wind vane spinning slowly on the roof. The gravel driveway crackled under our tires. There were tall pine trees behind the house and waist-high grass out front. The front porch creaked when we stepped on it, and the screen door let out a soft squeal when we opened it. Inside, it smelled a little musty, like wood and thyme. The host had left a printed welcome note on the kitchen counter. Basic stuff: Wi-Fi password, checkout time, a reminder to take our trash with us. At the bottom, in smaller print, it said, "Basement used for storage, do not enter." It didn't seem odd at the time. A lot of places have areas that are off limits. We figured it was full of tools, old furniture, or just stuff they didn't want guests to mess with. We spent the first day settling in, made coffee, walked around the back of the house, found a trail that led into the woods. It was quiet, really quiet.
No planes o overhead.
No cars in the distance, just wind and birds and a distant barking dog every now and then. At night, it got so dark you couldn't see your hand unless you turned on a light. We played cards and drank cheap wine until we were tired enough to sleep. The second night, I woke up around 2 a.m. I don't know why. No sound, no dream that I remembered. Just suddenly wide awake. I lay there, staring at the ceiling fan, trying to fall back asleep. That's when I heard it. It was faint at first, like a soft hiccup or a wet cough. A second later, it came again, just barely loud enough to be real. It wasn't a pipe or the wind. It sounded like a person. A low, short whimper, like someone trying not to cry. I sat up and held my breath. I thought maybe it was an animal outside, but it didn't come from outside. It came from below us. The floor, the basement. I didn't wake her. I don't know why. I told myself it was probably nothing. Old houses make weird sounds, especially ones this far out. Maybe something had fallen over. Maybe a raccoon had gotten in somehow. I tried to ignore it, but it happened again. About 10 minutes later. Quieter, then silence. In the morning, I didn't mention it. We made breakfast and went for another walk. I kept thinking about that sound. I wanted to check the basement, but I also didn't want to break any rules. The door to the basement was in the hallway under the stairs. There was no padlock or chain, just a regular knob. That bothered me. If it was really off limits, why not lock it? That night, it took me longer to fall asleep. Around the same time, close to 2 a.m., I heard it again. The same soft, choked whimper. I sat up, listened. It was clearer now. A breath, a sniffle. Not loud, not constant. Just enough to make your skin crawl. This time, I got up. I didn't wake her. I took the flashlight from the kitchen drawer and went to the hallway. The basement door didn't creak when I opened it. The stairs were old and steep. Cold air hit me the moment I opened the door, colder than the rest of the house. It smelled different too, damp, heavy. I went down slowly, one step at a time, keeping the flashlight low. The wooden stairs opened into a small landing with concrete floors. Most of the basement looked normal. Dusty shelves, some old paint cans, a broken chair. But at the far end, there was another door. It looked newer than the rest of the basement. Plain wood, silver knob. It was slightly open, not wide, just a crack. Enough to let sound through. Pushed it open. The room inside wasn't big.
Bare concrete walls, no windows.
The air was stale. In the middle of the floor was a mattress. Filthy, stained, no sheets. There were metal chains bolted into the concrete, the ends lying limp. And on the far wall, long, deep scratch marks. Dozens of them. Some fresh, some faded, some stained dark. I didn't go any farther. Couldn't. Something inside me screamed to turn around and get out. My mouth felt dry, and I felt cold down to my stomach. I backed out, went up the stairs, shut the door. She was awake when I got back. I didn't lie. I told her everything. She didn't speak for a long time. We packed our stuff right then. Didn't even brush our teeth. Just threw everything into our bags and got in the car. It was still dark when we left. We didn't talk much on the drive back. Just silence, headlights, and the road stretching out like a tunnel. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see headlights behind us. But no one followed. Nothing happened. When we got home, I tried to pull up the listing. It was gone. Not just unavailable, completely erased. The host's profile, the photos, the reviews, all gone like it was never there. I reported it to Airbnb, wrote out everything. I don't know if they believed me. They said they'd escalate it. Then I never heard back. A few days later, I looked up the address on my own. I found an old real estate listing from years ago. The house had been on the market for a long time, then suddenly sold for cheap. No names, no history, just dates. I don't know what we found. I don't want to know. I keep thinking about the mattress, the chains, the marks on the wall, that sound. Whoever had been in that room wasn't making it up. Someone had been down there. We don't talk about it much. I still check listings extra carefully. I avoid anything with charm or secluded. We haven't used Airbnb since. Some nights I still hear that sound. Not in the house, not for real, but in my head. Plays back sometimes like a loop. A small, broken sound in the dark. A sound that doesn't stop once you've heard it. I booked a small stone cottage deep in the Scottish Highlands for a week in October. I needed a break. Everything had been loud lately. City traffic, work deadlines, phone constantly buzzing. I wanted quiet, space, something that would let my brain breathe. The cottage looked perfect in the photos. Isolated but not falling apart. Just the kind of place where I could read, walk, and not talk to anyone. The drive from Inverness took longer than expected. Narrow roads, endless hills, fog that got thicker the closer I got. It was dark by the time I arrived. The kind of dark where you can't even see your hand when the car lights go off.
No streetlights.
No nearby houses. Just this old stone building with a small porch and a red door. I let myself in with the key left under a plant pot, as the host had messaged. Inside, it was cold. I turned on the lights. Old lamps, no overheads. They gave off a soft yellow glow, made everything look older than it was. The furniture looked like it had been there for decades. Wooden chairs, plaid couch, heavy curtains, a fireplace that still smelled of soot. There was Wi-Fi but no signal.
No TV.
A shelf with some books, mostly local history and mystery novels. It was quiet, just what I wanted. There was a coffee table in front of the fireplace, and on it sat a thick, leather-bound guest book. I almost didn't notice it at first. Looked like a prop. I thought it would be a few pages long, just names and dates. But when I opened it, the entries went on and on. Dozens of them, all handwritten, all in different styles. The first one I saw was dated 1927. I flipped through 1943, 1956, 1981, 2004. All the years filled in and nothing recent. The last few pages looked newer, written in pen rather than fountain ink or pencil. But still, none of them were recent. It made no sense. I checked again. The most recent date in the book said August 30th, tomorrow. Some entries were normal. Lovely stay, great view, that kind of thing. But others were strange. A woman from 1962 wrote, The radio turned on by itself again. I'm leaving early. Someone in 1989. Don't go into the back field after dark. And then others that were less clear. The lights whisper at midnight. Don't answer the knock after 3:13 a.m. I didn't know what to make of it. Probably just people messing around. Then I saw the last entry. It was short. The handwriting was shaky, almost like the person was writing in a moving car or their hand wasn't steady. It said, "I'm not the one who booked this. Let me out." That was it. No name, no date. Just tomorrow's date written above it in tiny numbers. August 30th. I closed the book and pushed it away. Weird joke. Maybe the host planted it to creep out guests. I unpacked, made some tea, and went to bed. The bedroom was small, just a single bed and a dresser. No locks on the doors, not even on the front one. I wasn't used to that, but it made sense in a place this remote. Around midnight, I woke up. I wasn't sure why. It was silent. No wind, no animals. The kind of silence that feels heavy, like the air isn't moving. Then I heard something. A soft clicking sound, like a light switch. I got up. The hallway light was on. I was sure I'd turned it off. I walked out. Nothing was there. No movement, no sound. I turned it off and went back to bed. 3 a.m., I woke again. I looked at my phone. 3:12. The cottage was still quiet. Then, at 3:13, there was a knock. 3 slow knocks. Not loud, not aggressive, just precise. I froze. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The knock came from the front door. The red one. I waited. No more sounds. I didn't go out. I didn't even look through the window. By morning, I convinced myself it had to be an animal or something shifting in the wood. Old buildings make noises. I didn't want to overthink it. I made breakfast, read a book, went for a walk down a gravel path that led behind the cottage. The air was cold and fresh. No cars, no people, no animals either. It was too quiet. Even the trees didn't move. Later that day, I went to make a fire. I found a small door beside the fireplace. A supply closet, I thought, creaked when I opened it. Inside were logs, kindling, and an old metal box pushed in the corner. I pulled it out. It was locked, but the lid wasn't fully shut. Inside were Polaroid photos, dozens of them. Most were blurry. Some showed the cottage, same furniture, same layout. Others were of people, men, women, even kids, standing stiff in front of the fireplace or outside the red door. None smiling. A few looked afraid. I flipped through them. Some had dates written on the back. They matched the guestbook entries. One photo showed a man I swear I'd seen before, maybe in the guestbook entries. He was holding the same guestbook, standing beside the coffee table. He looked confused, maybe mid-sentence. That picture had the same date as the one on the final guestbook entry. The one marked tomorrow. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. I sat in the living room with all the lamps on, staring at the guestbook. I kept telling myself it was a prank. Maybe it was all staged for some horror Airbnb experience. But there were no cameras. No mention of that in the listing.
Ide Sheka.
Felt too real. 3:13 a.m. came.
Nonak.
I waited anyway. Minutes passed. Nothing happened. I finally started to relax, just slightly. Then the hallway light turned on. Again. I hadn't moved.
I walked over slowly.
No one was there. I turned it off. When I got back to the living room, the guestbook was gone from the table. I found it back in the fireplace closet, right where the box of photos had been. Open to a new page. My name was written at the top. Today's date underneath. I hadn't written it. That was enough. I grabbed my bag, didn't pack anything else, and left. I drove all the way back to Inverness in the dark, not stopping once. I booked a hotel and stayed 2 more nights in town. Didn't tell anyone. Didn't leave a review. Back home, I went back to the Airbnb listing. It was gone. The host profile was blank. No history, no reviews. Like it had never been there. I checked my photos from the trip. None of them had saved. Not the cottage, not the walks, not the guest book. Just one picture somehow taken inside the living room. I wasn't in it, but the coffee table was, and the guest book was open, the page with my name on it. Nothing supernatural ever happened. No ghosts, no floating objects, no voices. Just small things, too small to explain to anyone without sounding paranoid. But I know what I saw. I know what I didn't do. I didn't write my name in that book. I didn't take that photo, and I didn't make that knock.